Coming up on this episode of Flirtations, we're going to meet two Flirties and hear their stories of being in a relationship with a narcissist, how they got out, and what life has been like after. And let's just say there's life after a narcissist, and quite a good one at that. First up, we'll meet Madeline Beeler, and then later in the show, we'll meet Randi Markowitz, both of whom have powerful stories to share with you today, ultimately about courage, healing, and loving yourself. Also, good Flirties. Their stories are ones of survival and resilience, and I cannot wait for you to hear them and meet them. So whether you're currently in a difficult relationship, perhaps with a narcissist, have experienced this in the past, or simply want to understand more about narcissism, this episode is filled with real-life experiences and heartfelt advice to inspire and guide you through it all. Let's do this, Flirties.
I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and a gay Libra. Everyone has an inner flirt.
Hey, Flirty.
Live, laugh, flirt.
Work the flirt.
Work the flirt. Delulu is the Salulu. Expert on the flirt.
Hey, Flirty. There's always another flirt.
Everyone has an inner flirt. Get out of your head and into the flirt.
Flirties, I am so excited to welcome Madeline on to the show today, talking about narcissism and dating and relationships. And I'm so thankful that we've got a Flirty here to share a story with us. Madeline, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to share my story and be a Flirty on this podcast. Like, this is so cool.
I know. I love it. This is already so much fun. So much fun. Let's get right into it. And I just want to hear a little bit more about you, your story, and what you'd like to share with the Flirties.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Madeline, obviously. Apart from being on this podcast, I'm a single mom as now. I'm a business coach for entrepreneurs, and I live in Houston, Texas. So that's like a little bit about me. But my story really starts with getting married. I think way too young, but it was, I had a baby and then got married and did the kind of right thing to do, in quotations, right thing to do.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, like, me and my ex-husband, we definitely dated, and we're like friends with benefits, and then, fell in love, or like what I thought was love, and then got pregnant. So our story was very interesting, but there were so, like, looking back at it now, like, there's so many red flags that I just those two just gloss over and just accept as like, oh, that's who he is, and it's actually not a big deal. And 7 years ago, or like in a relationship that was 7 years long, I now see, I wish I would have like known better. But it's at the same time, like, I also had very little self-worth and self-esteem about myself. Like, I was in the process of loving myself, but it was like, oh, he can love the rest of me and I don't actually have to like love me. So it was like kind of like filling that gap. And now I'm like, oh, I'm so ashamed and embarrassed of like where I was, but I've healed and come a long way. And I did, eventually leave the marriage. This time last year was when we both decided to like end it.
Yeah.
And so it's been a year since I've been separated, and it's been really amazing. And
yes,
post-divorce, or the divorce isn't finalized, but I say like we're divorced and it's done because like energetically it's done.
Yeah.
I'm thriving as a single mom, and it actually like is so much better than I expected it to be.
So good. Healing and thriving post-relationship. I think I want to kind of reverse my questions a little bit and start here in the present moment and focus more on your healing and what that transition was like out of this relationship, and how you started to evolve like your self-confidence and grow that, and esteem and self-worth. I want to hear a little bit more about that part of your story.
Yeah. Okay. So my self-healing journey started in 2020 during the pandemic. And I feel like a lot of us really started healing during the pandemic times.
Yeah.
And I just remember so my daughter, she was about a year old, and I just remember being so frustrated. I was working 9 to 5 still at the time,
Mm.
trying to be a wife, a mom, working.
Mhm.
And I was just so frustrated, and I was like, I'm tired of feeling this way. Like, there's got to be a way to like help myself.
Yeah.
And then I kind of fell in love with self-healing, crystals, all the fun stuff
Mhm.
to like
Mhm.
help me.
Yes.
And started doing Reiki and became like a Reiki master. And over
Amazing.
time, it slowly just kind of transitioned into um, looking at, oh, I'm being treated really terribly.
Mm.
And let me see if I can talk to him about it. Of just like, hey, when you do this, like, just like basic conversations you should have in a relationship. And it was
Yeah.
always, oh, you're crazy, or that's not happening. And I was like, oh, I guess it's not happening. So I was like continuously being in
Mm.
this like gaslight like
Yeah.
loop. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah, everything's fine. But it wasn't fine. Like inside, it just felt like I was kind of withering away
Yeah.
because I couldn't have a conversation with someone who was supposed to be my life partner.
Mm.
And in 2021, I did this meditation and ended up crying so hard because I realized this marriage like shouldn't like needs to end.
Mm.
So, last year was 2023. So it took me almost 2 years to 2.5 years to fully walk away, even
Okay.
though I knew that this marriage like wasn't gonna last. And like I was settling and being treated very poorly.
Yeah.
Um, and there was abuse, verbal, emotional,
Mhm.
mental. There was physical. He never hit me, so I will say that. But like there was things broken and everything.
Yeah.
And so the healing process really started for me to leave the marriage 2.5 years before
Yeah.
we like called it quits. And it was at the same time I was like growing and scaling my business. And so it was like business, as you probably know, like you having a business will like make you heal and make you look at your shadows so that you can
Oh my
elevate and become
gosh.
the CEO that you're supposed to be.
Uh-huh.
And so while I was in this business journey, it was teaching me to look at my self-worth
Yeah.
and look at what I was willing to settle for. And so my business definitely took a part in like healing me and the process of this is what I want. He can't give it to me. Like he's incapable and has no desire to. So like, what do I need to do
Mm.
to start planning strategically to get out of this? And like part of
Mm.
that, like a lot of reason why women stay is because financially we can't. Like we
Yeah.
can't support ourselves. There's also the factor of me having a kid of like,
Yeah.
who am I to take my kid away from her dad and break up our family? But it was just like, you know what? Like if I don't do this, she's gonna normalize abuse and
Yeah.
she's gonna be in the situation. And it was like, this is where like us breaking the cycles has to happen. It ends with me. Like I watched my mom go through it and
Yeah.
many women in my family too. So I was like, you know what? The cycle breaks with me and I'm walking away. I'm gonna do what I need to do to make money in my business so I can be like thriving.
Yes.
And it all like the universe definitely came in and like supported me through this whole process of like, we're doing this together. Like, let's fucking go.
Yes.
And I think I'm in this process now where I have been dating someone
Mhm.
and it's been very interesting to see how amazing I'm being treated and the contrast of just like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
wow, like I really let that happen. And there's been this level
Mm.
of like shame
Mm.
of an embarrassment of where like, wow, I really thought it was my fault that like when he got mad and broke something. And it was just
Yeah.
like, wow, like I was never responsible for this person.
Mm.
And he saw, the weakness in me, the vulnerability, and like took advantage of that
Yeah.
marriage. And then being with a safe man now who's like, I'm just like, you're not going to yell at me for getting us lost in Houston. And he's like,
Yeah.
no, we're just going to go to the right address. And I'm like,
Ugh.
oh, wow, okay. And it's been an interesting journey because the shame is very real of I'm settled for that. I let that happen. Like I played a role in my own suffering, and it's not like to beat up on ourselves, but just the acceptance and love that we have to have of like
Mhm.
facing the hard truth of
Mhm.
I didn't think I deserved anything better, and I let this continue for so long,
Yeah.
and it has really frazzled me. And I'm seeing just how much it's been, a year since we've been together, and like I'm just seeing all the ways I've just like been contracted of of, basic communication with someone feels like hard and like expecting them to blow up. Like with my boyfriend now, I'm like, so you're not going to yell at me and like go like Jekyll to Hyde real quick and like
Yeah.
you're not going to do that. And he's just like, no, like let's have a conversation and like let's create this connection together. And it's just like, oh wow, okay, cool. You're not going to use my emotions against me and whatnot.
What a difference. And like you said, it's the cycle stops with you, breaking the cycle for you and now your family. This is and I'm so glad you're on the show and sharing so much about your story, because that's a part of this. Is it's the shame and sometimes the guilt that comes along with the process of leaving, and also just it's being able to be with that, but then also accept that what happened did happen, but being able to break the cycle and make changes moving forward. And so I'm curious now, I think the question I want to ask is, so like for you, it sounds like your business and your family, like those were two things that really helped you just focus to grow something to then evolve out of that relationship, knowing it took some time. So for the flirty listening that is, maybe doesn't have any kids, or, isn't a business owner, or is maybe completely dependent, like how can they start to find that thing, like really something that lights them up, so that they have something to be like, all right, like this is ultimately, like I have to do this also for me. Like I have a life that I want and need to live.
That's a really great question. So like finding something to like, I guess, reconnect with, there's more than just like this abuse, what I'm living. This is what I did when I like was newly single, was events in Houston on a Wednesday night or something, because it was a Wednesday night and I was like, I want to live my life. Like I need something to happen. And I went to an open mic poetry reading. I recommend you just like finding something that like sounds fun to do in your city, and learning what it's like to be alone with yourself. Because we're so like, because oftentimes we kind of like want a partner to fill something in us. And that's not a partner, that's just codependency, and it doesn't ever end well for anyone. And it's just, I think it's not a sexy answer, but it's like, you gotta be happy with yourself. And by doing that, you have to kind of break free from the anxiety and do something new. And I think what that ended up doing for me was creating like the safety of, oh, I really can walk away from this. Like I don't have to go back, because there was like, oh, should I go back to like fix our family? Like, my daughter's going to see that a 2 separate household, like all this stuff. And it was just like this realization of like, there's a life after this. And if you're in the thick of it, or you maybe separated from someone who wasn't the best, it's giving yourself evidence of there's safety, there's love, there's a life beyond this person. And it doesn't have to take forever to heal. Like it's been less than a year, or like months. We're on the other side, and it's amazing. And you just have to take that first step, and that first step is the scariest.
And still healing, but healing through that fear anyway. And in the midst of that, finding new interests and passions and connections and a new boyfriend. We're going to get there. I do have a question about that. And I think I now want to ask, taking it back a little bit, some of those initial signs, perhaps even red flags that your ex presented that, you were, maybe overlooking or accepting or rationalizing to yourself, especially with like, this is such classic behavior, right? The gaslighting that exists certainly within, that narcissists present all the time, but we can see outside and just in all areas of dating too. And I'm glad you mentioned the codependency piece, where it's like, I know it's we want the connections, and it's I know we're craving it, we want it, it's so important, but then it's like, what purpose is that connection serving us? How is it fulfilling a need versus a want versus, all these things. But the question being, some of those, what are now you now recognize as like, oh, that was something.
Yeah. Okay. There was so many. So
Mm.
the distance and like the hot cold temperature of just like, oh, we're really great. And then a week later, like things aren't great. And this is like we were kind of like friends with benefits, but we were also like in love, like prior to like marriage. So setting the scene. So the way he like reacted when something didn't go his way, like punching something, screaming. And I grew up kind of in a not great household. So I was used to when men were angry, they hit something, they yell, they freak out. So like my nervous system was like used to that. And I didn't know that there's actually men that like are healthy and can feel their anger in a better way. And so I remember this was like when I was pregnant and we were driving to a doctor's appointment. And I remember he like hit the dashboard of my car because something like fell through for him. And like something didn't work out the way he wanted it to. And I just remember like feeling so scared in that moment. Like I'm driving my car, I have his baby in my tummy, and just being like, who the fuck is this person? And then like dismissing it as like, oh, he's upset. I would be upset too. But like when I'm upset, I never did that. I remember he was only there for me in like really bad moments. And, like his consistency of partnership would be just gone.
Yeah.
And it would get really bad and being like, hey, I don't feel close to you. Like, it feels like there's distance. And he would be like, oh, you're just making that up. And I was just like, oh, I guess I am. And it's just like, okay. And so there was the distance, the reactions, the gaslighting of like, oh, you don't actually feel that way. Everything's fine. But I think those were like the biggest ones. It's just like, it's not normal for someone to react that way.
Absolutely.
Someone should validate the way you feel and like want to work with you and be like, how can we like create a solution? So,
and this is part of the challenge it's part of your story. I think a lot of the Flirties will relate to this too that are listening, where it's like depending on how you grew up and the relationships you saw around you, maybe with your parents or just elsewhere in your family, aunts, uncles, grandparents, it's like something becomes normalized that shouldn't be normalized, but it's what you're used to and it's what you become conditioned to accept and see is like, oh, okay, this is love, or oh, I saw this person in my family, this is like tolerated or deal with it, and this is just how it is, and this is like how the cycles happen. It kind of manifests in a weird way, but so glad you were able to step back and break that cycle. I'm curious now, did he have this habit of like having lots of apologies after something would happen? Like, was that ever a part of it? No. Okay. No.
I don't think
like
I've ever
zero. Okay. Zero accountability whatsoever.
No, it was always my fault, which I've like, and you internalize that and that sits with you. Like that was 7 years of everything is my fault. And it's you taking on the emotions of others. And like, now I'm in this place of like, oh, they're upset. Like, I need to fix it. And it's just like, that's not my job anymore. Like, that was never my job. It won't be my job going forward. It's like, they can heal their shit and I can heal mine and like, we'll be fine. So it's, there was no accountability. And it was just like, and then I did believe, I was like, oh, like, it was my fault that he, punched the hole in the wall. And it was like, was it though? Because I don't punch things when I'm mad. So,
just blaming you for absolutely everything. I think, okay, I want to ask, so you're with somebody now, and so how, like, moving, there's been some time, about a year or so, but starting to make this new connection and date someone, and so quite a contrast, but how you're able to make that a part of your healing and start dating again and now develop what sounds like a really secure and safe connection. So maybe some strategy or sort of how you're able to navigate that transition.
Yeah. So a lot of people, will say that when you leave a marriage, like you should take some more time to heal.
Mhm.
But I think dating after a long-term relationship, marriage, or anything like that is you got to know yourself. And like for me, it was like I just spent the last 2 years really healing, and I'm ready to just like experiment and like see what it's like to be treated well. And that was like, and I'm going to date really good men. And I listened to like Dating Intentionally, like the podcast by Talia, and I love
Obsessed. Yes.
Yeah. And the ability to like just date and have fun. And like, I knew eventually I would want to be in a relationship with someone, but I wasn't ready. So for a while I just dated and was able to like go on these really great dates with people and just get to know them and just like see what it's like to just be treated like just a human. And it really like healed the wounded parts of me, and like especially like my inner child and like all these different areas of just like I was always supposed to like be treated this way, and just like that love and acceptance of like, I'm sorry past me for thinking I deserved anything less than that. You can use dating as a way to heal, but like it wasn't seeking validation from these men. It was very like, I'm open to whatever, and I know like I'm going to get exactly what I need in my healing journey from this. And it's interesting because when I met my now boyfriend, the day of, I was like, I really don't want to go like on this date with this person. Like I'm so tired. Like at this point I was like, I'm kind of tired of like meeting people and it kind of fizzling out. Like they're just not the person for me. Like, I'm really ready to like meet someone I can build with and just see where that goes. And then I meet him, and it was like the best first date I've had in a long time. Like we were just talking. There's so much connection. There's the chemistry. There's the compatibility. And we're having a picnic at a park, and the park's closing. And it's just like, well, do you want to like go to a restaurant and actually eat something and like continue our conversation? And so we did that. And it was like, I think like a 6-7 hour like first date of just, wow. Like, and it was just easy breezy, beautiful. But it's also been a very test of my healing journey of like waiting for the shoe to drop has been like the way it feels. It's like everything's been good. There's not really like, we're compatible, we're aligned in like a lot of aspects. There's some things that like that I do that bother him and things he does that bothers me, but it's not like, it's just like, oh, this is just who you are.
Yeah. It's two people coming together. There's got to be a few things.
Right. But it's like, I'm just waiting for that flip to switch where the gaslighting comes, the hot and cold of like, oh, I liked you yesterday, but I don't like you today. And it's just, I've just been anticipating it. And like, I'm so thankful that I can have these conversations with him to where it's like, because, and what I love the most about this person is when I'm like, hey, I'm feeling this way. He looks me in the eyes. He puts his hand like on my knee and like shows me that he's present and like willing to hold space. And I've never experienced that with a partner of like, I'm ready to like, let's have this conversation. Let me hear what's going on. And like, let's be in this emotionally vulnerable place together. And I was just like, wow, you actually want to hear what I have to say. And you're validating what I'm feeling, and you're not making me bad or wrong for thinking this. And I told him yesterday when we were driving, I was like, I just keep waiting for you to go Jekyll Hyde on me, but like I'm seeing who you are, and like it makes me feel so ashamed that like I used to settle for just being treated like shit and like thought abuse was necessary to have a relationship. And it's been interesting dating and healing and healing from abuse, of just the love and acceptance, and then finding someone who's like not just willing but like wants to hold space with you and like remind you that, hey, what you went through like really sucked, but you don't have to like go through it alone, you know, like I'm here to hold space for you. And there's also like me healing my own stuff without him, taking a step back of like, ooh, I'm feeling really anxious and like I need my own space to ground and not dump my shit on him because this is my inner work. So there's like this beautiful balance of that. But I hope that answered your question.
Oh, it definitely did. That was a beautiful answer. It sounds like one thing he's really bringing is to this relationship is consideration, right? Not trying, like giving you that space to be open and express what's on your mind and how you're feeling. And then him being able to actually consider and not jump in and be like, oh, let me fix this. Like, let me do this. Like sometimes it really is just about healing that happens through conversation, communication, and deepening a connection in that way. But I'm hearing like so many good things. And I know you picked some of this up from Talia. I know you did. It sounds like you're doing a little bit of like the slower burn, right? Dating somewhat with detachment, not being, detached from the dating process, but more so detaching from that need for external validation and going towards codependency when you are perhaps having moments of anxiety or discomfort. It's more so asking, okay, what do I need? How do I feel? Taking care of yourself. And this is where having some of those things in place, like your business and your self-care practices, your self-love practices, this is why they're important. Because we can't rely on any one person to just be like the thing that is just like fixes everything, right? It's great in a relationship to heal relationally, of course, and have that connection, but be able to maintain some personal autonomy there too. That's important. So lots of good things. I think some great dating tips out of that as well. Shout out to Talia.
Yeah, shout out. You're amazing, queen.
The first ever guest on Flirtations.
Yes. I
Yeah.
love that she was your first guest. I
know, right? So cool. So cool. And so I think really I just have one more question. I feel like this has been such a great part of the episode. And I want to ask you just from your perspective, if for anyone listening that may be like, well, it's maybe my friend or a family member that is in a narcissistic relationship or an abusive relationship, and I don't really know, like, how could I support them? What could I do for them? Yeah. So for that person, from your perspective, how can you support someone that is maybe in a not so great relationship?
Yeah. I would say, because I had a friend who I really leaned on during my whole thing. And the best thing that she did for me was like, she didn't try and fix it or tell me what to do. She just held the space. So when it was, hey, like this happened, and she just reflected of like, wow, it sounds like this and this happened, and that wasn't right. And instead of being like, oh, leave him, dump him, like da 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 da, it was just like what he did wasn't right. And just like over time, that just kind of, you're right, it wasn't right what he did or what he's doing. This isn't normal. And there's a way to do it, and just like a very loving holding space. But I feel like you have to be, you're not there to solve your friends or your family members' problems, but you can't hold space. And something else that I wish I knew when I was in it was like the resources of shelters that for like domestic violence and all those resources. Like there's so many people that you can call anonymously just to talk to, that can offer you even more free advice. So if you're that friend, maybe gathering that information, and if something like that happens, just be like, and you don't have the ability to hold space for your friend, just being like, hey, what you're going through is not okay, but I don't think I'm the right person to talk to about this, but here's this number, and you can do it anonymously. You can come over and call them and have my bedroom and talk to them. Because I know not a lot of us are like in the right energy to hold space for these kind of conversations. We don't know how, but that's the best way I think you can be there for your friend, is just presently, like, I don't know what to do specifically for you, but I can offer these solutions, or you can just stay at my house or something like that. But
I think that was great. I think that's a great answer. Madeline, thank you so much for being part of the show today, for being a part of Flirtations. Any final thoughts for the Flirties?
Something that feels present to say is in regards to like dating and doing this whole thing of life, is like, no one's here to save you. Like, you have to save yourself. But if you're seeking a savior from someone who isn't you, it's good to check yourself before you just wreck yourself, in all honesty. So you're your own savior, and you don't need no man.
You don't need no man. Yes. So good. Oh my gosh. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was incredible.
Oh my goodness, Flirties. What do you think? Such incredible storytelling from Madeline. But if you think we're done just yet, we're not. In between recording and the episode release, which you're listening to right now, we have an update from Madeline. That's coming now.
So a little update on just my life and dating life and all the things since after this podcast episode was recorded was my boyfriend and I, who I talked about in the episode. We have been together for a little over 4 months now. We are in the I love you phase, which is really amazing, and life is going really well. Of course, there's bumps in the road and more layers of healing, and just being able to create a sense of safety even more so every day, of creating my own self-talk versus giving in to the abuse that I endured, and just seeing how beautiful life is when you let yourself free from those who don't have your best interest at heart, unfortunately. And life update and all the things is the biggest takeaway, I think, is we're so scared to walk away from things that are causing us harm, and we know we deserve better. And I feel like if anyone is hearing this, of life is so much sweeter, but the sweetness really comes from you being willing and having the courage to do it scared, do it when you don't have all the pieces in place, and just know that there is a life, there is love, there is so much joy and happiness on the other side when you choose yourself and you're willing to do the inner work, from healing from abuse and narcissism and toxic relationships and all the things. And not only do you get to manifest and attract a partner who loves you and supports you and adores you, but you get to be that for yourself first and foremost, and watch how when you become that person for yourself, you only attract people who want your best interest, who want to support you and love you and cherish you, who see who you are, and stop giving away your power to people who just want to hurt you and cause harm, and choosing a better way of living. And just know that there is so much freedom for you on the other side, and it's really beautiful out here.
All right, Flirties, deep breath. Up next, we are going to meet Randi Markowitz and hear her story of being in a relationship, married to a narcissist for 15 years, how that relationship ended, how she transitioned out of that relationship, and what she's doing now. Another story of hope and inspiration coming up next. Flirties, on the show today, we are sitting down with someone I know from the store. Another round of Trader Joe's story time with Randi Markowitz. Hello and welcome to the show.
Hi, it's very nice to be here. I'm happy.
I was chatting with you in the Stacks and Grocery one day a while ago, and I remember you talking about, I was sharing about my podcast, about what I do, and then you were sharing you had this relationship with a narcissist, and I was like, the episode perhaps at some point, and then here we are, and I'm so thankful and grateful you're here today to share your story with us about dating and being in a relationship with a narcissist. So at the top here, if you'd like to share a little bit more about yourself with the Flirties and how that relationship came to be.
Okay. So to give you a little bit of a backstory, I grew up in New York. I grew up in Long Island, very non-religious Jewish family. And in those days, so it was a while ago, we had this view of, you get married, you have 2.5 kids, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
And I had relationships, but through college, but none of them were Jewish guys. And my parents had pushed Jewish, and it just didn't wind up that way. And so by the time I was 40, I was still single, never thought I'd get married. I moved to San Diego from New York City. I wanted a new life. I wanted to actually drive, and just changed my life. So I moved to San Diego from New York City, and I lived in an apartment complex. It was kind of still under construction. I had to go to the rental office that was in an unused apartment across the parking lot. And so I would go there all the time because there were problems. And above that was a person that had an apartment, and I would see him on the deck sometimes, and I would see him to and from going there. And we had a welcome to the area, the complex, and there were like 20 people, and he just popped up in front of me. So he's a tall French man. He was good looking, but I honestly thought he was gay. He drove this Sebring, I think, convertible, and he looked gay. And he thought I was Italian because I drove a red Jetta, small, dark hair. And then I thought we were going to be, just friends. I met, he had a friend with him that I thought was his girlfriend, actually, or something. And we became friends. We would go out. His English, so he had moved the year before. His English was minimal French. Okay. He spoke French, but it was minimal English. So we became friends, and I really wasn't that attracted to him. But one night we're hanging out, and he just like out of the blue started to, kiss me, whatever. So it was a very weird relationship because he wanted to, so we started to like see each other, but it was kind of like secret, and he didn't really tell anybody. And so it was very strange. So you talk about, I'm going to jump around a little bit, but red flags, like we would walk someplace in construction, and he wouldn't hold my hand. And I thought that was weird. But to preface, I didn't have a lot of experience dating for long periods of time. Things that you see when you look backwards were things that now I'm like, oh, I see this, I see that. But I grew up with a dad who was like Mr. Magoo. He was an accountant. He had like big glasses. He called everybody sweetheart because he couldn't remember their name. He lived his life with rose-colored glasses. So whereas a lot of women that I know grew up with someone their father was not the best, my father was. He actually made it seem like I would meet someone like him. I thought guys could be that way, and they can. But in my experience dating, I thought if I was nice, then they would like me, which is really honestly not true. So the thing about narcissists is that they mirror you. So you fall in love with yourself. So you like to play tennis. I love to play tennis. Meanwhile, they maybe have never played or don't really care. And so when I met him, he would just follow me around, or he would be excited if I went to his job, like all of these things. And I was getting attention from a tall, handsome French man. Yeah. And who wouldn't like that? But I saw over time things that I just accepted, because when you don't have that experience, like I didn't know what a narcissist was. Right. I heard the words, but I had not known I was dating only narcissists, because when you're an empath, that's what you attract. And they go to people that are, I had friends. I just moved there, but I made friends easily. I was working out. I was in good shape. I was, happy that I had moved from New York City, and I was driving, and I was exploring. I had just moved to San Diego, and it's beautiful, and I didn't have to worry about winter. And that's what attracts them, because they live through others. Right. And in my experience, narcissists are either, they become from a family, they were either abused and they took on another personality, or they were put on a pedestal and they just feel like everyone should treat them that way. And in his case, he was abused by his mother verbally. His dad was just like, he would check out. So he had low self-esteem. And so I had so much empathy of when he moved to San Diego and he was by himself and all this other stuff. So our hearts, as we have empathy for them, regardless of what happens. And I noticed that was my go-to of, I always had empathy. Oh, I'm so sorry you were by yourself. I'm so sorry, but you don't get the full picture. So we, cut to the chase, we met in June. And I always had that little voice. That's the other thing, that we always have to listen, but we dismiss that voice because we think we're being picky, or we think we're being crazy, and he had overstayed his visa. So we wound up getting married in my living room in September or October of that year that I met him. Mm-hmm. And in retrospect, had I dated him for a couple of years, I would have never married him. But I saw little things as we got married. Then we got married in a real wedding in New York, because I think he married me for the green card, but then I think that he actually had feelings, the most that they can have.
Right.
The thing about narcissists is that in that moment, that's how they feel. So they're not really lying, but then it can change in 2 seconds. That's how I think the discard is so easy. It seems easy for them because they justify everything in their head. So we wound up getting married. We adopted a child. And what I saw, I always excused his behavior for certain things because of the way he grew up. So that's the thing about, empathy, is that we tend to just, we forgive a lot. And one of the tips is you listen to those feelings, because I heard divorce in my head many times because he had an anger issue. And they don't like when things don't go their way.
Right. And
so he would have fits. He would have a fit of anger, make things worse. And that's not how I grew up. Mm-hmm. And not that my family was perfect. My mother had been verbally abused her life, and she passed it forward just by, my sister and I have had fear-based issues, but we always knew we were loved.
Yeah.
So he didn't have that. And so through our marriage, he was terrible with money. And it was a lot of narcissist men who marry women have a love-hate relationships with women. Like they need to be taken care of. And it starts out where you feel like you're in a love relationship, but then, and it's always kind of their love, but then they turn you into their mother. And one tip I can absolutely give to anyone that is dating, gay, straight, whatever, if that person that you're with has a hatred for their mother, I would suggest that you run, because one of the things that I can see of all my friends that are in a successful relationship, that especially, man and woman, let's say, or, the guy respects their mother and loves their mother.
Yeah.
He hated his mother. She's got a personality disorder. And so he needs women to feel validated. But at some point in that relationship, it turns into, you're my mother. And then they have resentment and anger towards you. Yeah. And that was how I did basically everything. And I was, when our daughter was little, I would be the parent, because he had no experience. He would just parrot me, and it would be like, I just, said that. So the thing that I realized is that as an empath, we always give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
And they just soak that up.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a few themes that are coming out thus far in the conversation that are parallels that I've been hearing. And one is that a lot of narcissists do tend to date and want to be in relationships with empaths. Because we do tend to forgive and give people the benefit of the doubt and give people grace, lots of chances. We even make excuses for them, have a lot of patience, because we truly just want to see the best in people. Right. And I don't believe that comes from necessarily a place of being naive, but it's just, we want to believe people have our same hearts and care as deeply as we do. And it's tough to rationalize when we meet people and can enter into relationships with them that they don't have the same heart. So that's one theme I've seen. Another one is this around pacing, that the relationship with the narcissist moves very quickly, where you met in June and then here you are, your first wedding, let's say in September.
Around there.
So kind of early-ish fall time, moving very, very quickly. And you mentioned something a phrase that I hadn't really heard before, but makes so much sense. Is that in this early phase, they mirror you. And I see that as a way for them to deepen the connection very quickly. And it can make you feel like this person is really falling for you. You're falling in love together. There's that deep connection because you just have everything in common. It's like
they get you, they understand you, they like the same things.
Yes.
Because they're very much chameleons.
Yes.
And I'll give you a quick example because supposedly so the woman he met, or that's another long story. The second woman he cheated with, they wound up marrying, but she was a runner. And all of a sudden, after we were together 20 years, and he never wanted to work out with me, never, he'd had a physical job and he was in good shape, but all of a sudden he started running. And I'm like, you didn't run in like all these years. Well, I always wanted to run. I used to run he was in the French army. And so what happens is he started to run, went to the running club with her, and all the things that I couldn't get him to do, he did. And that's another sign where they all of a sudden take up a hobby that other person is with. And they have to do that so that they mirror each other, because if anyone I'm sure you've talked to said, it was the most amazing thing. I finally had someone who would do this with me or do that with me. Well, it's not forever. And once you get discarded, he'll go back to doing, or the next person doing whatever they want to do.
Right. Right.
There are some women narcissists, but I think for whatever reason, it's more prevalent with men that I've heard, and I've talked to people.
It seems to be, and Flirtations is definitely, and my content is more so geared for, I say, like the ladies, gays, and lovers of men, the people out there that are dating, forming relationships, making connections with men tends to be who is listening, not exclusively. I want to ask you a follow-up question now, where you were mentioning not having a lot of dating experience. And I think a lot of, especially women, want to be the good girl when they're dating. This is something I hear and see a lot. If you're raised in traditional family values, or perhaps related to your culture, your religion, just where you're growing up, boys and girls are raised differently. Right. And so speaking a little bit to that, just maybe if it was like you didn't know what you didn't know, or if it was like, what should my boundaries be? How does this look around pacing? Speaking a little bit to just kind of that part of the experience.
So I dated a lot. I had a Jewish mother. So I was, I did online dating. I did everything. Okay. So I had experience in, there was no religious barriers or anything. I did have, very much a nervous mother. But my experience really was more of the not being true to myself and not really even knowing who I was, always seeing myself through someone I was dating. And I got broken up with a lot because I think I was never truly authentically myself.
Okay.
And I didn't know what you don't know. I the only one time I was dating somebody who I was just a nice person, and we knew each other through our moms, and he was a little bit younger than me, but not a lot. So I was in my 30s, and we were just talking about dating, and I forgot he wanted to break up with me because he thought I wanted to get married to him, and we had only been dating a few months. I said, I think I have a wedding gown in my closet, just waiting to pounce on anyone unsuspecting. And I said, not only do I not want to marry you, I don't want to date you. And then what I saw about that was when I put my foot down, which I should have learned then, it was like, oh. And so I think this other guy had narcissistic tendencies. When someone tells you, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this in order to date me, do not date them. And so my experience was, I had always been broken up with, and him I broke up with because he was just horrible to me. But, who broke up with who? If he was being horrible to me, and I finally was just like, this is done. So by the time I met my ex, I was just like used to always being broken up with. And when you meet someone who love bomb, that's the other term, love bombing you, like just is head over heels in love with you, no matter what. And it's a quick turnaround, and it's someone who you get that whole phrase gets swept off your feet. And the other thing is that a lot of times they will fake future you, which I learned also. And I can get to more detail on that, is that, when we do this, when we get married, and you're like, wait a minute.
Yep.
But when you have, as a female or a male, low self-esteem, you really don't know who you are. You're afraid of being yourself because you're afraid people are not going to be, want to be with you. And so you change who you are to basically be, if you're empathetic to begin with, and then you change your personality. What you don't realize is that when I was really becoming myself when I met him, and we were married for 15 years. And it's a terrible analogy, and I apologize. I'm an animal lover, but it's that whole frog in water type thing, where like you're in cold water, and then eventually you don't even know that you're boiling because it's gradual. So by the time, these blew up with us, I didn't again know who I was, just a reflection of them. And that's why it's so hard when empathetic people get discarded by narcissists, because you're almost the minion of that person, and you don't know who you are anymore. And so when you get discarded, you have to kind of start from scratch. So anyway, I didn't have any religious issues, but it was more of my dating history was that the longest person I had been with.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So it's coming into this relationship with some experience, but it sounds like repeating patterns and kind of dating in one way, but then also coming into dating with this uncertainty of just who I am. And I relate to that so much. And this is why I love having these conversations on Flirtations, and why in my content, my videos, it's not just about dating strategy, who texts first, right? Boundaries, what is love bombing, the future faking, things to look out for, because you are the most important piece of all of this. Like it's really comes down to you and how you want to show up and just build confidence and self-esteem. And it's because our desire to love and be loved and connect it's innate, right? It's an instinct. It's not just I want this, I need this. It's like this is a part of our biology. And so it makes sense that even if we're not sort of quote unquote like whole, and that's not what I mean to say here, but we're on our own healing journey, we still are very likely dating, making connections, things like that. So I appreciate you sharing your experience thus far. I have a question I want to ask you now. So this was a long-term relationship, 15 years with the French guy. How did you leave that relationship?
Here's a lot of concurring things. So I was in my 50s and I was going through menopause, and my mother was not alive, and I really didn't understand. Whoever tells you menopause is like getting, your period is wrong, because it is a hormonal massacre to your system. And I started to speak up. I always managed the money always, and he lied about so many things, and which I knew kind of at the time, but I found out a lot more later. And so I was just kind of, the filter was off. When you're with, they say walking on eggshells. It's true, because you are tiptoeing, and then one day you're, by no choice of your own, the filter comes off. And so when that came off, he started to get upset. And then one more, I could tell he was mad at me about other things. And one day I had a jewelry party, and he invited some woman that was a friend of a friend, and I didn't know her. And it turns out that he started an affair with her, but I didn't know. And talk about being naive, because I never cheated on him, and he said his first wife cheated on him, and if I ever so much as kissed someone, it would be done, which I didn't. But anyway, so he basically announced that morning. I said, "What is wrong with you?" And he's like, I said, "Do you want a divorce?" And he's like, "Yes." So when that process started, that was the end of 2015. 2016 was a year of torture, And so he basically, another thing that physically or mentally they torture you. And he was back and forth because I have a daughter and she was 12 or 13 and he announced he wanted a divorce in front of her. And so he basically said, I want a Porsche. I want to go to France every year, all the things that we couldn't afford because I thought he had promised. I worked in his business and with him and I gave up my marketing career. So what happened over that year is I didn't know I was living with, I didn't understand. It was devastating. I was okay with the divorce because it happens. I wasn't okay with what ensued, just the back and forth and his cheating and his jerking me around. And I had been with him for 15 years. So what happens with people that are that, and there are people that are very happy in their relationships and married, have kids, have a great sex life, travel, and the husband or whoever says, well, I'm done. For whatever reasons, he felt that he had a midlife crisis, but it continued, and I was not going to be with someone that cheats. So he basically blew us up, and then the recovery came from that moment. So people that are left by narcissists because they get, they want someone better, the grass is greener. You have an opportunity because I was blown up, but I put myself back together. I had a choice. We all have a choice to either give up. And I wound up eventually with breast cancer. And I really do believe that it was, from my perspective, it was that fight or flight that I had all the time. And that's the other problem with being with someone who could just walk away is that you're left confused, you're left distraught. You have, you're like, I couldn't leave my child, but he would go and, live his life and have a girlfriend and do all this other stuff. Whereas my daughter was 12, 13 years old. She needs me. I can't just go, So basically he blew us up. And people that leave narcissists, it winds up being much different because they will then try to just annihilate you because they have this narcissistic wounding.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it is the empaths that get, lost. You don't know who you are anymore. Because you've assimilated all of their traits and things, and you have to basically start over.
Yeah, we're hearing, or I'm hearing now this kind of, I haven't heard this side of the story where it's thus far, I've heard mostly stories of the person sort of with the narcissist trying to leave, and the narcissist is like, nope, you're not going anywhere. Right? It's all about that control. And now we're hearing the reverse of that, where one day, just out of the blue, see ya. Just, yeah. How did you start to pick up those pieces and make that transition? And you're with your daughter, and I've gotten to know you a little bit, and you're an artist and creative. And so start to, form this, maybe form a new life.
So concurrently at the same time, we had a pretty big house that obviously I was going to live there with my daughter. So I had to sell the house. I had worked with him for 10 years in his business. So I had to find a job. I had to find my daughter and I, a place to live that had a fenced in yard that I didn't want her life to change too much. And so, and then deal with his shenanigans for a year because, when they discourage you, when you move on a little bit, that all of a sudden it's like, I don't want to be with you, but I don't want you to be with anyone else.
Exactly.
So it was a very hard year, but I knew I put things in place. I wound up doing energy work. I went to therapy. I made sure my daughter was in therapy. I had to sell my house, and I found a place to work in my town through another friend. And so I had a job, even though I was heartbroken most of my time. And he worked across the street from where I wound up getting a job, which was not the best thing, but it was okay for my kid. We shared custody, and he would drop her at school. And so what you do is you just know that people have survived it before you and survived after you. The way I felt about breast cancer, and survived before me and, will survive after me. And so I started doing kettlebells that I've been doing with a friend She has a class for like 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
I put things in place because I knew, I think subconsciously, that it was an opportunity for me to be my authentic self, because I had been working on myself just spiritually. And I think that this was something that I knew I needed to be done.
Yeah.
And one tip for empaths is that sometimes it has to be so horrible for you to let go. Because if it's mediocre, you'll hang around because they all narcissists do intermittent reinforcement. It'll be great, and then there'll be an ass, and then it'll be great, and there'll be an ass. And so for my personality, I'm loyal. I'm a Leo. I'm loyal. I would have probably hung on, even if I felt like we had an good relationship, but now I know we didn't really not. And you cannot have a relationship where there are a lot of lies and deception. And so my tip is that, as empaths, as horrible as it sounds and horrible as it is, it almost has to blow you. If you're hanging on by your fingernails, something has to blow you completely off for you to start over. And that was the way it was for me. And I had an opportunity to either, it wasn't easy by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
That was 2016, 2017, probably had breast cancer, but they didn't catch it. So 2018 was when all of that changed. But the thing about being in that narcissistic relationship is like, you don't feel like you have control over anything in your life. But once you're given the opportunity, it's your decision to make it. Either you can go on with your life and have the life that you were supposed to lead. And it's not easy. And I've had really hard times. I have incredible friends. And the thing that got me through were all of my friends, because my sister who lives in New York, so she couldn't be there all the time. And so it was my friends that helped me get through, friends that had been there before me. So I have a lot of friends that were married to narcissists.
Yeah.
And they told me that it takes about 5 years. And that was at the beginning. I'm like, are you kidding me? 5 years? It was at least 5 or 6 now when I saw him at my daughter's high school graduation in 2022. I didn't care. It was like looking at a glass of, soda. It was weird to see someone I hadn't seen in 5 years that I was married to. But so my tip is that I put things in place, lean on your friends.
Yeah.
And do not listen to anybody that says get over it, because there will be people that say, well, I knew he was an ass, and I knew, or, he's a jackass, get over it, or she's a jackass, get over it. Well, you can't just if I could, I would. And so anyone that tells you just get over it, you should not be communicating with them about anything. And when I made an analogy, when I wound up having cancer, I lost my hair and I looked sickly. People were compassionate and empathetic. When you have a breakup and your heart is broken, it's not showing on the outside, but it's just as hard. And so people look at you when you're in a relationship, he's an asshole, she's just get over it. But when you have a sickness, they're like, oh. So I think that women or men that are going through this, that get broken up with, have to know that there is a positive outcome, but you now have control. And so it's okay, because when you look back and think, do you really want to be with someone that could dump you, throw you out like a piece of garbage? Do you really want to be with someone who can demean you? No.
Right.
So that's how I just put things in place, and I have amazing friends and time. It's that cliche, but time does heal, because you're not, and a lot of women and men are trauma bonded to this person, that they feel like they can't survive without them, but you absolutely can.
But you can. And I love kind of what you were saying here and offering the Flirties, really a lot of great tips, but this one also about control, because when you're going through a breakup and it feels like life is chaos and this wasn't something necessarily that you decided and it's coming out of the blue, and it feels like there's a complete lack of control, coming back to yourself, knowing that maybe for the first time in a long time, you actually are in control of all the decisions moving forward and can set yourself up and lean on your friends and your support systems and your community, and just forge ahead. Be the survivor. Yeah.
Right. And the one other tip is that, they tend to triangulate you. So in my case, he cheated with 2 different women, and would not tell the other women that he was trying to still be with me. And don't let yourself be triangulated. As you get stronger and they see that person emerge who is strong and confident, do not let that person back in your life, because I think the other tip is that they'll start to see you the way they first met you, and you are becoming truly yourself. Now you're more enticing. So please, when you are broken up or you leave a narcissist and you have your own life, the other thing is go no contact. Now, I went no contact, even though I have a child, but he could only email me.
Okay.
The other tip is that, and do not check their social media, because at the beginning I would just torture myself.
Yeah.
I haven't looked in 7 or 8 years. And cut off contact, go gray rock, because you do not need that noise and interference from that person.
Right.
You have to put that protection around you. Supportive friends and don't let people say, oh, I saw your ex, blah, blah. I saw your ex at Food Lion. You don't need to hear any of that, because people would tell me, and I finally said, I don't care.
I don't care. Yeah. Yeah. Really, really good tips today, Randi. Thank you so much, and for sharing your story and your experience. I think it's going to be really empowering for the Flirties that I know are in this situation right now. In some way, they're either starting to date, they're in the relationship, they're dealing with the breakup, or thinking how do I leave? How do I get out? And so I just love that you have been here today and really showing people the way forward and what's possible after too. Because when you're in it, it's really hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
It is. Just get support and you'll be fine. Yeah.
Any other parting words as we finish up the conversation today?
Yes.
Okay.
So one thing that I learned through friends that are in successful relationships, you need to be a whole person. Be your whole person. Do whatever you can to be if you don't like being by yourself, you have to do it. Be a whole person in order for you to meet someone. Now, I haven't met anybody, but I know that I'm truly myself. I'm myself when I work at Trader Joe's. I'm myself with my art. Just be yourself, because don't worry so much about meeting that person, because that's what makes you change your values and change your decisions. Just be your best self.
Be your best self. I love that. I will echo that all day long, Randi. Yes, I will.
Good.
Yes. Randi, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'll see you in the near future.
Near future.
Flirties, that's a wrap on this episode of Flirtations. Thank you so much to our guests, Madeline and Randi, for being on the show today and sharing so much about themselves and their stories with you all and myself. Cannot thank them enough for opening up and being vulnerable and ultimately helping me create this space of healing here on Flirtations, which is exactly what we're here to do, is do some healing, level up, and become our best, most authentic, highest version of ourselves. Oh my goodness. All right, Flirties, wherever you may be listening in the world, thank you so much for tuning in, for streaming, wherever you may be listening to this. I invite you now to please rate, review, subscribe to the show, share this with a friend, someone you want to share some big flirt energy with. It really helps me out so much here at Flirt Headquarters, just to continue this really important mission of connection. All right, that's going to do it for me here, signing off officially at Flirt Headquarters. My name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and gay Libra flirty. Happy flirting.